of Islamic psychology. But just to summarize, you should know, we have over 1,000 years, not of just medical science and making some of the most advanced discoveries. Just to give you an example, you know cataracts? You know, Muslims were the first ones to do cataract surgery. They invented the needle that was able to extract the cataracts from the eye. The Muslims. That's at a medical level. But what we don't talk about many times is that at a psychological level, we were also made huge advances in curing the nafs of people. Okay? Using this wisdom, like the first hadith I gave you, using this wisdom from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, okay, to help people. The first hospital that was built by Muslims, this is only about 75 years after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. 75 years. We had a hospital built in Damascus. Okay? And it wasn't, hidden away. This hospital was in the center of town, very close to the masjid, so that everyone could have access to it. And treatment was free. All right? And they added the psychological components. So they put gardens in it and around it, because greenery has an effect on us. Right? Hearing the birds chirp in the morning, so they put a garden there. So hearing the birds chirp in the morning, you know, it does something to the patient. It helps them. And so they added all of these things and made it accessible to everyone. You know, there were women doctors who were responsible for treating the women patients. And there were men doctors who were responsible for treating the men patients. This had to do with medical treatment and psychological treatment. Okay? These are some important figures in Islamic psychology. I don't want you to think that I'm just shooting from the hip here. All right? So Ali ibn Sahal, Rabban at-Tabari. As you can see, this is very early on, 838. Very early on, in his book, he had a book, it was called Firdaus al-Hikmah. Firdaus al-Hikmah. And he says in that book that people can get sick psychologically just based upon their imagination. What they imagine is going on. And everybody in here who has brothers and sisters and spouses, we know how that goes, right? Sometimes your spouse will say, no, you said this. You say, no, I didn't say that. And a whole issue can come from an imagination. This is what he's talking about. All right? That sometimes just the way we think can cause us problems. And it's the job of what he called the wise counselor to come in and give you wisdom. In other words, have a therapeutic session and help you to overcome that. Okay? This is, more than 1,000 years ago. And then the next one, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. I have his book right here. One of his books, the second one there. Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. Right? Almost 1,000 years ago, he wrote this. Right? This is the English translation. Abu Zayd al-Balkhi. And in it, he's talking about, the psychological issues that happen with human beings. And he divides them up into 4 categories, like anger and aggression. Like what happens when a person has anger? Sometimes anger is not, direct. Right? It's what we call passive aggression. He talks about that in here over 1,000 years ago. That if a person is not able to express his anger, not able to get it out, he'll have this passive anger where he makes smart comments. And he says he needs to be with a counselor, someone who can help him to overcome that. So he talks about that. He talks about sadness and depression, obsessions like OCD. 1,000 years ago, people. This is part of our heritage. Okay? And fear and anxiety. And you should know that the two most common psychological issues that happen with human beings is exactly that. Some type of anxiety and some type of depression. Okay? It's very natural. This is the reason why Rasulullah SAW used to say, it was part of his morning program, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-hammi wal hazan. Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from grief and anxiety. He used to say this. It's part of a longer dua, but he used to say this because this is something very common to human beings. And so what the scholars are doing is they are elaborating on our states and telling us how to overcome it. Okay? Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, same thing. He talks about, he was a master at what we call psychosomatic disorders. And he gives a case in one of his books where, there was a young lady and she was depressed. She was very depressed, and the family was bringing the doctors and saying, what's wrong with her? And they couldn't give a biological diagnosis because there was nothing wrong with her. Even though she had debilitating depression. So she's in the bed as if she has a biological illness. So when it finally came around to him, he started doing some research about her, and he found out that she was actually in love. And that the one that she was in love with had died. So he took her pulse here, and he began to ask her questions about the beloved. And her pulse began to quicken. And he knew instantly, this is psychosomatic. She has a psychological issue going on, and it's causing the physical illness. There's a lot of research on this now. A lot of research on this, where people experience trauma in their lives, they never process it, they never overcome it, and they develop cancer from it. Wallahi, study after study after study, people are finding this. This brother here, Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Zakaria al-Razi, he knew this almost 1,000 years ago.